Hello everyone and welcome to Quality Old Games. Today we are making another tier list, this time from Gaul's unit roster, and the unit roster is based on a single player campaign. So in addition to fighting capabilities, also the requirements and price are taken into consideration. But without further ado, let's begin with cavalry units. First we have Barbarian Cavalry. And, I'm infantry type of a player, so perhaps some of you guys appreciate cavalry a bit more than I do, but in any case, in my experience, Barbarian Cavalry is not too reliable. Of course, they have bonuses in winter and in woods, so that's nice, but all in all, I don't like the unit too much, and because of that I will give it only a B tier. Perhaps I'm a bit biased here because I like to play as Romans, and as Romans, Barbarian Cavalry, even on very hard difficulties, really easy to beat. So only, B tier for me. Then we have Barbarian Early Bodyguard or Early Warlord. And overall, I don't think that Gaul's cavalry roster is that good. And if the early bodyguard or early warlord is compared to the rest of the Gaul roster, it clearly shines. Because it's heavy cavalry, it's easily accessible, and it's actually decently good in the early game. So, in my opinion, it's actually the best cavalry unit that Gauls can have, even if one takes into consideration that you cannot recruit it. So usually I'm putting bodyguards on A tier, but in Gaul's case I think I will give them S tier, because the lack of any other cavalry, or rather good cavalry units, they don't actually have access to. Then we have late bodyguard, and actually in my opinion the improvement to early bodyguard is rather insignificant. So you get these guys when Romans are getting post-Marian units and most other factions are fielding whatever armored hoplites, bull warriors, etc, etc. And these guys just are not good enough in the situation in which they come compared to the early bodyguards and their situation. So because of that, I think I will give them only A tier place, even though they are of course better than the early bodyguard, but in the situation I think they are actually quite a bit worse than the early game version of the bodyguard. Then we have Barbarian Noble Cavalry. Yeah, of course they are better than normal Barbarian Cavalry. Tier 3 unit, I don't know, I will give them B tier because they get some nice buffs over the normal variant, but they are not that good either in my opinion. So perhaps low A tier or strong B tier. Let's put them into strong B for now. And then perhaps the best cavalry unit Gauls can train, the War Dogs. They can be quite useful. Of course, the handlers are taken out rather easily, but the dogs are replenished for every battle and so on, so I think they deserve a place clearly in A tier. Rather good unit in surprisingly many situations. So they deserve a place in A tier. Then let's move to infantry units. First we have Chosen Swordsmen. And actually, these are the best infantry unit Gaul has, and I think pretty much the best infantry unit Gaul has in relation to other units and other Gaul's units and other units that other factions field as their top tier units and tier 3 units. And of course, Gaul's roster is, in my opinion, rather bad overall. It's rather limited, as you can already see here, but also they don't have quite those heavy hitters that some of the other factions have. For instance, Berserkers or Chosen Axemen or Bull Warriors or Urban Cohorts or even Armored Hoplites or Royal Pikemen or something like that. But, Chosen Swordsmen, they can get the job done if they get enough support. But of course in very hard difficulties their morale is a bit squishy in my opinion. So a good concentration of enemy forces, enemy elite forces, can rout these guys rather quickly, especially when their war cry wears off. But in the mid game with war cry, these guys can do rather well, and that's the reason they get a place in A tier. Then we have druids. A temple unit. I mean, they can do something in battle. They have 2 hit points, rather nice armor, and they can buff morale. Of course, that morale buff, in my opinion, is rather limited. So I would consider rather getting another military unit instead of these morale buffing units in battle. So, in my opinion, druids are relatively obsolete. I won't put them in D tier because they can actually survive quite well in battle, and of course if your army is mostly warbands and so on, so perhaps that extra morale buff can become handy, but still I don't quite like that unit, and the unit size is really small, whereas in the highest unit setting, chosen swordsman gets 160 men in one unit, these guys get only 64. So that kind of already hampers their usability in battle. So yeah, C tier for me. And let's zoom a bit out. Then we have Naked Fanatics. And the more I have tested this unit, the less I like it. I mean, it's same tier unit as Swordsmen, and it performs way below the Swordsmen. Of course, there might be some situations where you have the temple building from which you can recruit Naked Fanatics, and you don't have barracks, and you just need to have troops. So then perhaps you just have to train Naked Fanatics, though it will take 2 turns to train 1 unit of them, which is a huge minus for a unit of their let's put it, lack of quality. So, in my opinion, you just should avoid Naked Fanatics. Unless, of course, there is a situation where you just cannot do anything else, then I guess they are better than nothing. So, yeah, D tier, most obviously for them. Then we have Barbarian Peasants. It has been a bit controversial, at least in some comments, that I'm putting peasants quite often in S tier, but I'm going to do it in this case as well. And the reason is that if, as a goal, you can get to the end game and you begin to capture larger cities, as goals are capped to tier 3 cities. So basically, if you capture tier 4 settlement or tier 5 settlement, you are going to get massive culture penalties, and that's going to mean troubles for public order. And Gaul's kind of capabilities for improving public order are rather limited, so you need to use garrison for that, and for garrison duties, peasants just are the most efficient choice. So, especially from the perspective of late game, peasants are a must, in my opinion. Of course, in the early game you can also use them to transfer population from one settlement to another, if you are rushing for the higher tier units, which I think you actually should be doing, because then you can really gain the advantage as Gauls, because spamming warbands usually is not perhaps the winning strategy, because they take quite heavy toll on the population of your settlements, which are mostly not big to begin with, and furthermore they suffer quite heavy losses in battles in my experience. So you would be better off with, for instance, tier 2 units compared to tier 1. And speaking of tier 2 units, we have swordsmen here. I mean, for tier 2 units, these are rather decent. In my opinion, with Warcry, they can take on rather well Roman tier 2 unit Hastati. Well, perhaps they will struggle against hoplites, but overall I think swordsmen are rather solid tier 2 unit, especially if you utilize Warcry. So that extra boost to attack and perhaps a slight boost to morale is quite nice. And I would take swordsmen anytime over naked fanatics, because they just perform better in one-on-one, and these guys take just one turn to train. So most obviously swordsmen over naked fanatics. Then we have Warband, and I mean this unit is a material for memes or jokes, and I have to admit that I'm joking about them as well. But if you consider that they are actually tier 1 unit, so kind of an equivalent for Roman townwards, for Eastern factions Eastern Infantry, for, I'm not even sure, actually Iberian Infantry is tier 2 unit. So if you take that perspective, the Warband, especially with Warcry, is not that bad. But on the other hand, you are not likely facing town watches with them, but you are facing Hastatis, you are facing spear warbands, you are facing militia hoplites, etc, etc. And in that context, the unit is not really that good. But of course, you can use higher numbers to overwhelm the enemy, and the Warcry is always nice. And one has to remember that this is tier 1 unit, and of course the unit size is big, which can be an advantage in battle, but of course at the same time you will be depleting your population quite quickly if you are training mostly these units. So basically perhaps Alicia and Patavium are the two settlements which can kind of support the consistent making of warbands. But overall I think the unit is decent enough in the earliest game, provided it's play controlled, because the AI, well, in its sense, even in very hard difficulty, it just tends to melt before Hastati. But I think I will give these units a weak B tier, despite its glaring weaknesses. And then we have 2 missile units left. I guess you know where Forester Warband is going to go, but let's keep it somewhere around here for a while. Clearly one of the best archer units in the game, rather expensive to train, and it takes 2 turns to train, which in my books hurts the unit quite a bit. Then on the other hand, especially if you can upgrade it, plus 3 weapons, plus 3 experience, they become quite the killing machines in the battlefield. So clearly a doomstack material. And unlike other archery units, these guys don't have small swords or daggers, but they have spears, which means that they can actually take on light cavalry charge quite well and win actually that battle. Heavy cavalry is another matter, but then again, heavy cavalry most likely will roll over swordsmen and druids and naked fanatics, etc, etc. So nothing to be ashamed of that for these guys. But yeah, I think one of the best archer units in the game. Of course, it's tier 3, so you need to kind of rush to that tier 3 to get maximum benefit out of this unit. But actually, this is one of the only units in Gaul roster that can actually maintain its value in the end game against other factions' elite units. And that of course means that you just have to have these units if you are to survive in the late game. And because of that, the unit clearly deserves a place in S tier, and I'm just wondering, is it the first place or second place? But because it's tier 3 units, I think I will value the early Warlord's bodyguard a bit higher than the Forester Warband, but they're quite on par with each other. And then we have Skirmisher Warband, another unit type I don't like at all. I mean, yeah, one javelin can do a nice amount of damage, and based some of the comments, these guys can work as rather nice flanking force as well, but the number of javelins is so small, the range is so small, and Yeah, and when I'm fighting against these, they tend to break rather easily. Light cavalry charges can be devastating against these, so, I mean, perhaps you guys can play better with these guys, but I will give them seat here. Just save the men and do swordsmen instead, or train war dogs or warhounds and eventually these forester warbands. I don't think skirmisher warband is actually that good. I mean, they take one slot in your army, which could be filled a bit better with other units, at least in my experience. So, do you agree or disagree? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And very special thanks to channel members. Your support is greatly treasured. Have a great rest of the day. Quality Old Games out.